competent and even brilliant, you're making that master, that person above you, look better. And if you can create that illusion that through your work you're helping them, you're making their public appearance, their reputation better, you're going to rise to the top. You're going to secure your position. And Galileo was a consummate courtier, particularly early on in his career. He later wasn't and suffered for it. And he had discovered these moons of Jupiter. He didn't invent the telescope. That's sort of a misconception. The telescope existed then. It was a sort of a child's toy, and he was the first person that actually take it and direct it towards the stars. And he had detected these 4 moons orbiting Jupiter. But as a scientist, he needed money, he needed a patron, he needed somebody to support his career. The Medicis were the powers to be in Florence, and so what he did was very clever. They were essentially his master. He named the stars after the Medicis, and sort of in ennobling them and giving them those names, they were so pleased and impressed that they became very powerful patrons of Galileo. I mean, it's a theme that happens throughout science. Interestingly enough, I just discovered in my new research the man William Harvey, who essentially discovered the circulation of blood, the theory that blood circulates in the body. It was very controversial at the time because nobody believed it. And basically, he convinced King Charles at the time and got his support by giving the analogy that the king was the heart of the country and the people were the blood, and everything circulated through the king. And by creating this analogy that made the king seem like even more powerful, the king ended up sort of agreeing or not being distressed by this discovery and becoming a major supporter of Harvey. So Galileo wasn't the only person that did the strategy, but I thought it was the most interesting example of it.
It's certainly a profound and official form of flattery, is it not? Of the highest order.
But it's, as I said, to come back to a theme, it's an indirect form of flattery.
Okay.
So if Galileo had merely discovered these moons and then said, "Oh, you Medicis, you're just wonderful people. I love you to death. Aren't you fantastic?" They would see through that, and then he wouldn't get anywhere. And that's what a lot of people make a mistake. Flattery is not direct flattery. Is too obvious, and it also can make people uncomfortable. But if indirectly you can make them feel powerful, well, there you go. And I talk in the book, for instance, in just a little small note, oftentimes you take someone like an actor who's very well established and has won Oscars, but on the side, he or she likes to paint. If you wanted to flatter this person or ingratiate them, you don't flatter them for their acting, because that's what everybody does. You flatter them for their painting, for what nobody else has been noticing in life. So it's sort of, once again, the kind of indirect approach and being strategic. Some people might find it creepy or a little too cunning, but it's actually very effective.
What are your challenges right now in your life, and do you have challenges at this time?
Well, the challenges for me are not what they were. I've got a very wonderful life as far as the capacity to write books. The challenge becomes more and more refined and subtle. So what the danger that I could have fallen into was simply try to keep repeating the 48 laws of power and, making, kind of cashing in on its success and doing little books that are very quickly written and I get money for, but sort of gives a veneer because of the title and cover that there's something interesting there. And so I learned, my idea was I'm not going to fall into that trap, because even though you might succeed in the short term, in the long term you ruin your reputation, and people, when they see your books, they've lost the respect. They don't think, maybe this is just another attempt to make money. I have to change each one. I have to kind of personally, so that I'm interested and challenged, and also for my readers, that I'm giving them something new. that's not in the other books. It's totally different. So that they come to think that every time one of my books comes out, they're getting something that's not just rehashed. And that's, it's exhausting to be constantly trying to do that. So my next book, I'm going through that process again, and it's very tiring. But in the end, it's so rewarding to be in control of your destiny and to write books that I have absolutely nothing to complain about. I enjoy the challenge, but that's what I forget the word that you used, but that's sort of what I'm facing.
Have you ever wanted to just step away from writing?
Well, no, because what happens is when you reach a certain age, I turned 50 recently, you realize that your days are numbered. I don't mean it to be melodramatic. I could live to 100, and I hope to. But I could, die tomorrow, and even when you're 20, you could die tomorrow. And so there's a sense of the devil is at your heels. And there are these ideas that have been haunting me for my whole life that I've not been able to express. I'm going to get that out in my next book, and then in the one after that. And if I suddenly died tomorrow and I didn't get to express those, I would feel very unsatisfied. So I have to get these things out. And then maybe this will be my 5th book that comes out. Maybe by the 6th or 7th book, I will take a deep breath and realize, well, all right, maybe I could write a play or a novel or something else, and I don't have that sense of I better express this before I leave the planet.
Your parents must be kvelling.
I understand that word.
I know you do. And kvelling, ladies and gentlemen, means so proud that they're like falling all over themselves. That's a Yiddish word, kvelling. There you go, Robert.
It's the opposite of kvetch.
Exactly.
Well, my father passed away 10 years ago, but he was there to see the success of the first book, and it was interesting because he never said anything to me directly. That just was his style. But after he passed away, we were at the funeral, and one of his colleagues told me, that he carried around with him everywhere this article that had appeared in a major newspaper about the books. And so I learned indirectly how proud he was, but he never said it to me. But that was even more powerful to know that. And then my mother, who is still alive, is kvelling an awful lot. It's almost hard to take, but she is kvelling.
You have to let her have that. You got to let the mamas have it, Let's talk about Napoleon Bonaparte. You seem to like to talk about him and to write about him, and share with us what you've learned from Napoleon Bonaparte's history.
Well, he's the major figure in the 33 Strategies of War. And basically, I in each book, I sort of identify kind of a major icon. In the 48 Laws of Power, there was the great French minister Talleyrand, and to some degree, Louis XIV. In the Art of Seduction, I had Casanova and Cleopatra. In the war book, it was Napoleon, and basically because he's the greatest genius of war that ever really existed, if you want to use a word that's connected with something rather diabolical. And basically because he had a sense of strategy that was uncanny. It would be like how we think of Mozart, who was composing at the very early age, and was sort of a wunderkind. It seems like unnatural almost. We can't even understand it. Well, Napoleon had that for war. So the task I gave myself was to figure out why. I didn't want to just mystify it and say he was a genius, and that doesn't help anybody. I wanted to explain it. I wanted to make it human. Why was he so good at it? So that we could understand it, and maybe we could learn from it. And so I had to read, because nobody really did that in any of the books that I read. They would sort of pick at the edges and sort of insinuate this is what he was so good at, but nobody connected all of the dots. that